Morning. Cold November day. We are out, just got the pigs and the piglets and the chickens all taken care of for the morning. And today I'm going to be working on the stairs. We'll take a look at stair code and design today, marking and cutting stringers, and how we install stairs to feel solid and be squeak-free. We'll be ready for finished floors when we're done, but these stairs will serve as is through construction until we're ready for that. Let's get it built. Still dealing with my popped rib, so that's pretty exciting. Basically means I'm not lifting anything heavy or anything like that for a while. Our last stair here is just a straight shot. No turns, no twists, no landings, nothing. Very simple. So one of the first things I'll look at here with you is I did indeed get some button-on gauges. So someone had suggested these on the last one, and they are a cheap tool, and I approve of cheap tools, and they do, what they do just perfectly well. So you just put them on to where they will butt up against the wood, boom, just like that. And that creates your measure for your cutout for each of the stair steps and risers. So this board's pretty good. It does have some knots here and there, and the biggest and worst one is right here. So I'm going to start here. I have extra on this board. I need 183 inches, and this goes, I don't know, a foot past that, so we're going to cut out around this thing, just get rid of it. I'm also going to be able to get rid of this little knot on the edge there. And I'll kind of trace it this way, since all the remainder of the knots that I'm really worried about are down there anyway. And with stringers, I crown top up and just keep it consistent. And the other thing to really look for is there a lot of warp? There's no real warp to this board. It's a good board. I managed to get 3 pretty good ones. No real cracking, like a little bit here and there, but nothing like continuous down the run, and I don't see any real potential for this board having problems. So when you get your lumber, you definitely want to check that over. But so if we went this layout, then we would continue this line cut down, and then this is gone, and then this is gone, and that's your attachment at the top of the stringer. This is a flush mount, so it's going to sit at the same level as that floor joist, just below the 3/4, and then effectively as a flush mount, the 3/4 that goes on top of it will match that floor. It's our first major concern, and we are going to be basically getting rid of this entire thing, so that is good. A couple of other smaller knots. This one is staying, but it's far enough in, it should be fine. We are splitting this one in half. It's pretty small, I don't think that'll be trouble. We do have our 15 steps, and at the bottom here, this one would just be reduced by that 3/4 inch to account for that subfloor, because this one sits on the subfloor at the bottom, and that would be our board. The other thing about this is that if we needed to, we can reduce this, up into, probably even up into there would be okay. You want to maintain a collar, like there's a distance you don't want to go below on the cross width there. But we're well within. We have plenty of space. I think we're almost like 5 9/16 might have been what the number was, which is plenty. So you don't want to go under 5 inches for that. So this void where we're putting the stairs is 12 foot 4 inches from there to here. And we have a little bit of extra because that terminates right at this 2x4 wall. So we have 3.5 inches before you get out into the hallway. The original plan was for 7 3/4 inch on risers, which is the maximum you can do, and I don't like doing that. You're allowed 3/8 of variation between your tallest and your shortest step, but at the same time, like going straight to max, you can't vary above. That's really difficult to manage. So what I'm going to do is we have the space to do it if we play our cards correctly. I'm going to add, you saw that we had 15 steps on the stringer. This is a flush mount, this 15th, but that is one more step than they called for, and that reduces us down to 7 3/16 on the rise, which is much more comfortable, easier for older people and smaller children, and a lot safer in my opinion. And it puts us somewhere in here within the stud instead of back into here someplace. And what that will mean, what we have to watch for is this hall is the landing for these stairs. And you have to have the same depth of landing as you do width of stairs on the cross. So the first thing we have to do is determine what is the width. I forgot, so let's put tape on it and find out. So here we are. I'm just running across, and this obviously does not count for the drywall. We're gonna be 38 3/4. That does sound familiar. It just ended up being what was gonna work the best with everything I had. If we run the stringers in and add a sideboard in standard 2x dimension, then you go down to 36 1/4. So we will always meet code for width minimum, which is 36 inches from finished wall to finished wall above the, basically at the height of the railing, not including the railing. And so we will absolutely meet code there, which is what I wanted to make sure of. So when we look at that, our hallway is somewhere in the realm of, 42, something like that. So we're fine. There's no way that this hallway with sheetrock on this side will ever be less than we need for this landing. All right, so we've double checked our measure. We're supposed to be tip to tip 183 1/2, and we're at about 183 3/4 or 7/8, so not off by too much. I went and checked all the individual measurements on here just to make sure. New toy to try out, Metabo HPT. Kind of heavy with the battery in there, but I'm really excited about this because I've been holding out on getting a circ saw for a long time now, thinking I'd be able to get through all the framing and everything else on that rigid that I've complained and whined about so much in the past. And then I saw get another battery and get the tool free deal for Black Friday, and obviously that was a no-brainer. So far, first impressions I think are really good. The blade's good. Obviously it's a brand new blade, but the saw is aligned well. Everything seems to be working just great. I'm getting cuts that are like, shaving my pencil lines, and they're thick pencil lines because I just use the your rectangular carpentry pencil, but it's nice to be able to just leave that hair of the line left over and have it be a nice cut. All right, so onto the Sawzall. You can use a variety of different tools for this. Sawzall for me works just fine. A lot of people use jigsaw. I have done that in the past. We're gonna cut out all these boards, just the last little part of the notch where the circ blade didn't reach. I like to put up a trace of the stringers where they're going to be sitting on the bottom, just to have a guide to double check and make sure that once I've got my 2x6s cut, that they're sitting just right. They need to match the stringer on the bottom so that it's easy to put the drywall underneath. That's a pretty good bubble. Some of them are a little bit more lean to the right. So just on the edge of the bubble on the right, get as close as I can, and it will be solid so long as they're consistent. So now we need to use this as a template and transfer it to the other boards. Second board is all marked off, and I think my major concern, I got rid of that one. That one's going. That'll stay, but it's a ways in. That one's gone. These two are inside, but they're a ways in. I did get rid of this crack. That's the only big crack. There is some saw blade differential on the depth of the cuts. I can't have those out and have this knot in. So that one's really a pretty obnoxious knot. And I could flip the whole thing over and then just keep all these knots all the way down. There's not as many knots on that side, but this is technically crowned the way I want it to be, as far as it should more closely match the other stringer from drywalling the underside and all that stuff. So we're gonna go with it, and if I need to, I can always add a friend onto this piece here. We'll see how it comes out, but as long as I'm careful, it shouldn't shatter on me. Not really sure how well this is going to come out. It got very dark, so we are in the time of day where today is supposed to actually start raining, and it has rained a little bit already. We're going to go ahead and get the last of the three cut, our three stringers. It's pre-marked, so let's take a look at this one. So this one, no cracks. The board does kind of, at the end, warp a little bit, side to side. Not very much at all, not enough for me to be worried. Knots, a few on the bottom and in the middle. This one right here I hope to get rid of, but by leaving that one in, let's see, I was able to get rid of that one pretty much entirely. Got rid of that one. Both of those two are pretty much gone. This one's pretty much gone, so it's kind of just, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other sometimes. So we're getting ready to put these Stair stringers up. I feel pretty good about the cuts. I feel pretty good about them matching up what they need to match up. And I am running that 2x material just the same as last time. So we're going to start with our angle, and these stairs are at about a 35.6, I believe. So we're going to go ahead and cut that, and then figure the distance that it needs to travel, and get that measured and get that put up first, and then stringers next. Got a nice cut off the bottom of there, so that's going to sit really nice, and it's just got to match up to where it's sitting. You can see my floor mark there. So this is our 1.5 inch pocket that we're going to create by putting this guy up against here. Drywall and a skirt board will go right into that. Let's talk about screws and nails. You didn't used to be able to use screws in place of nails, especially in a horizontal application. They could shear in half when placed under stress. Nowadays, you can use a structural screw. They're sufficient with their engineering to replace a nail. I tend to use nails. They're cheaper and faster when I just want to hold material in place, but I don't care if it's really nice and tight. I use screws when I really want to be able to suck that material together. The other concern is that screws aren't going to pop back out again. The material is going to break first. Whereas a smooth nail can work out over time. You can use a ring shank nail to prevent that. One more consideration is that if you make a mistake, you're going to have a lot more fun fixing it if you use a screw than a nail. So I like to start setting things like these stringer supports with a screw or two. All right, that'll hold it for us. One of the things that makes this very easy is I left a lip on the 3/4 subfloor on the floor above that comes out over the top of these hangers that we're attaching to, and because that lip is there, I can just bump up against it and know I'm at exactly the right height. Basically from here down, this side is slightly higher. I would not imagine it's more than a 1/16 because I can barely tell that we're off center. When I went to secure the holding screws, maybe we slipped. If the middle one and this one are the same height, then you're going to have a hump, and it's going to put pressure on this side and make the treads want to release. Whereas if it's a steady slope across, then it won't matter as long as the middle one is not holding off of this board. So let's check that out next. A 1/16 seesaw there. 1/16 seesaw there. Yeah, so that's good and solid. If it's a little bit low, even up high, which I will try and figure that one out. And if it is, then we'll know that we just need to raise this whole thing up just a hair to you know, kind of count. But let me find out what we got going on here. All right, so what I found was two things. First, this middle had a slightly deeper total height on the bottom, not the top, than the other two. So I shaved as small an amount as I could possibly manage. On the top, it was already flat, and so I didn't do anything up there. This right stringer, I had indeed allowed it to slip ever so slightly. It had fallen on the top by a little bit less than an eighth, a little bit more than a 16th. And so now we are sitting pretty much on all of these between those two tweaks at level, and where it's just raised a hair in the center off of the center stringer. And that will make this installation go much smoother. I should also have mentioned that I went along and did the small level on most of these, just to make sure that, you know, as you went down, you know, the stringers, that they were all, you know, roughly well situated relative to each other and just individually, you know. And if that's part of how I found that that one was off on the top. Grumble, grumble. So I was going to do a whole little bit on how, you know, this should be exactly 15 and 5/8 on each side, because the distance between here and here is 32 3/4, subtract 1 1/2. But every time I try and do that, I feel like I end up being wrong because of board warp on this project. So there you go. It actually worked out the way it's supposed to work out. We have less than a 1/16 of gap between here, none here, none here, none here. That's pretty much exactly the way it should go on. Now we've locked this in really nice and tight on the bottom. It's not going anywhere down here. It's not going anywhere up there. So we're going to start ripping our treads and our risers. Risers are going to be 7 inches by 35 and 5/8. And the treads are going to be the same width, obviously, but they're going to be 11 inches deep. So the tread, you're always going to measure that based off of what you're trying to achieve in the end and what you're using for your overhang. So we have a 10-inch base, right? And we want the overhang to be 1 inch. You can go between 3/4 and 1 1/4 inches of overhang. Your nose, your whatever you want to call it. So the tread, you'll typically install the tread so where it butts against the riser, and because that's the same going all the way up, you don't have to cut a special tread depth because of the risers. There's always going to be that compensation where you're not, you're just cutting your normal depth of tread, the 10 inches that you want it to be on the stringer, and then the 1 inch that's after, and it just keeps getting bumped, which accounts for the one that follows by the riser above. So let's get started on cutting. This is left over from previous, from the floor work, and it's pretty close already. It's 11.5, so we're just going to rip it down to 11. So I've got another piece here. This one is kind of a similar thing. Not quite 11 inches. And pretty humpy. So we're going to go ahead and preserve this chromey side here, but it should still be fine. I can go ahead and just cut that.
Last time I cut everything with a circ saw and it came out just fine. It's a little easier to keep a nice straight cut on a table saw and maybe a little faster. It was already in the house, so this time I just used that.
So we should have all of the risers that we need plus 1, and we only have a couple of treads, so now it's on to the treads. All right, so we're set up to where we're blading at 11. The blade will be within the 11 inches, not outside the 11 inches. So we should be able to get, some uniform pieces out of this. They'll be ever so slightly a hair less than 11, and you'll never notice the difference.
So this bad boy is just under 4 feet. It's 44 inches, which should mean 11, 11, 11, 11. Should be able to, you can see that it's right on though. And the saw blade will subtract though a 1/16 or so. So if we're really careful, you'll never know the difference between, 10 and 15 16ths or 7/8 on this sheet here, cut up. So we should be able to get 4 and then probably 1 off the top out of this one piece of sheeting. So let's see what we got. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this as a factory edge to start us out, and we're gonna rip this way next.
.45 inches, so we'll actually end up having just a hair shaved off at the end instead of having to, kind of compensate and have a little bit shorter of a tread. On these ones, it'll all be full 11 inches. So we have everything we need. We just need to get it all cut down to length now. All right, so we should be into the final phase of this project. Just have to glue it and screw the material all together and make it nice and solid. We have all the materials. We have our GRK structural screws. They have a
just an extra strength to them. If there is any movement in this structure, their structure will work more like a nail. They'll resist shear forces. Really all they should be doing is just holding it down, so there shouldn't be any lateral movement. But we can go ahead and use those the same as the floor. Our subfloor is our tread material. We'll go over top of these with finished floor. And our Advantech glue is the final component, that puzzle. And I'm just gonna do 2 screws, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then some in from the back where I can get those to go in just to join the plates up really nice together. And that will form up our stair. Already shook this quite a bit, but make sure there's plenty of that. I ended up being wrong on some of my initial calculations for how much this glue to get. And so this last time through I purchased more than I needed. So I'm not worried about having too much glue on this. I'm gonna go ahead and just put on whatever I feel like and call it a day. That I run that as a zigzag pattern, and I found that does, as it bubbles, it tends to create less of a straight down drip where the glue just comes off versus an up and down pattern on these verticals. If you're very careful with your glue gun, just keeping the glue gun cleaned, you can go a long ways as long as you're not allowing this to dry out by having this separated from one of these cans. I think the manufacturer says 90 days, but we definitely pushed that and had no problems with the glue coming out. You just got to make sure the tip stays cleaned, and sometimes that'll be where it plugs. If it's fully sealed up, you just wipe that and abrade it, and then it'll reopen the little hole at the end. So one thing you'll notice is that I don't put these screws in anywhere within this space, that first inch or inch and a half of the stringer, and that's so that you don't get as many splits. So if there are any issues with those stringers that you didn't catch when you were doing your layout, you will find them when you go to attach these. The screws, with the construction adhesive this good, the screws are almost more
there just to allow the glue to hold and to hold it in place until the glue holds. But these should not come out. If you put more than 2 in, I certainly wouldn't go more than 1 every 2 inches. So on a 10-inch like this, I could put another one in the center of all of these. I don't think that I'm going to need to do that, and I didn't on the previous stairs either. You've got very little room to play putting these screws in through the back of a 3/4 into a 3/4. They will take it. If it's good ply, I don't know if it's good OSB, they absolutely will take it and it will suck it together. And then, like the whole rest of the structure, your glue has a chance to hold, and that's really what you're shooting for, is to give that glue a chance to grab and hold the 2 materials together. That one can take a shim. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll just barely be able to fit a shim in there. And then that way when I put the screw back in, it won't budge. So what exactly was this project materials and cost-wise? 16-foot 2x12s, 2 16-foot 2x6s, a couple sheets worth of 3/4. We used most of a bottle of Advantech, and we used most of a bucket of a 300 count of GRK subfloor screws, 2.5 number 9s. I did forget to mention that the plans do call for an LS50 on these hangers where they connect into the header, so I did go ahead and install that into the blocking pieces on both sides. And yes, it is a pain to install a hanger like that after the fact. Just imagine me using my hammer like Austin Powers uses his car back and forth, and you'll get the idea of what that looked like. Thank you for watching.
See you next time.